What's going on, family? It's Brother Coasty at IALLG.com, where we're always building bridges within to explore the world without. And today's topic is part 2 of how emotional arousal can lead you to manipulation. In the last video, I hit on how emotional arousal isn't a bad thing, but it can be bad. And we're going to hit on that today. We're going to really dive in on that aspect of it today, exactly how and exactly what leads to this arousal being this trigger for you that pushes you into situations where you can be manipulated and how you can get manipulated with this. Okay, so let's start. Depending on your upbringing and depending on your parents' journey into themselves, into their healing process, will directly determine how they interacted with you, how they showed you love, how they disciplined you, how they raised you. And depending on how you were raised, as well as your environment and your friends and your family and your peers and your other partners, will directly determine your imprint on yourself. Your makeup definitely has a way with it too, who you are as an essence. However, typically what happens as children in childhood, a lot of that is covered up. Our essence is covered up with all these conditions and programs and this crap about what we should do and what we should be and how we should act and respond. And it's a lot of conditional loves given into place. So if you don't do this, you don't get this. And it starts confusing you, especially as a child trying to figure out the world and trying to figure out how you stand in the world and your relationship with the world. You get overwhelmed and you begin to conform, and you don't recognize that you're conforming because what you're doing is you just want love. You want acceptance. You want understanding. You want to be a part of what everybody seems to want to be a part of, the family, right? But this upbringing in this manner can lead to so many detrimental effects, so many negative effects on you. And these effects are your triggers. They are how you become emotionally aroused in a negative fashion. So let's dive into it. If your family neglected to love on you in your love language, if they failed to understand you, if they failed to just give you some of the small things, saying good job, I'm proud of you, congratulations, I love you, you're worthy, you're excellent. If they didn't give you praise and validation, guess what happens? You develop a void there. You develop a void. And I want you to just, walk with me, right? You develop this void from ages 0 through 7. And as you develop and you're in your 20s now, or maybe in your 30s or your 40s, guess what happens when somebody comes up to you and you say, you know what, I see you. Guess what? I love you. Guess what? I'm proud of you. And you got this void there. Somebody just tickled a spot that has not been touched either ever or in years. They rubbed a spot that you didn't even recognize that you had. And that's gonna what? That's gonna give you some feelings, right? That's gonna give you some emotion. That's going to emotionally arouse you. And now it feels good. Just like the first time you receive pleasure in any fashion, any form, any way. Maybe it's physically, sexually, maybe it's emotionally, maybe it's mentally, maybe you tried a new food for the first time and it was like, oh my God. And you want to keep trying the food, right? Because it felt good. It stimulated a special part of you. It's the same way with emotional arousal. When somebody feels a void that you have, or they start playing in the void that you have, you start drawing towards them, especially if it's something that you need and something that you have not received. You will start moving in that direction. And guess what? When that's the only way that you can receive that stimulation and it feels so good, you tend to start compromising who and what you are. I promise you, no matter how strong-willed you are, you will begin to compromise who and what you are unless you've begun healing and you learn how to fill that void yourself. That's what I'm all about, y'all. That's what assertiveness really, in a nutshell, is all about. It's about fulfilling your own needs and then presenting what you require out into the world. Emotional arousal leads to manipulation because if somebody arouses an emotion that's lacking within you, you will always seek to get that need fit or met with this other person or being or thing. You become manipulated. Some people might say pleasure isn't a bad thing, and pleasure is not a bad thing, but abuse of anything becomes a detriment. Abuse becomes a detriment. What is a detriment on a nutshell? It stops you from growing. It harms you in some way, shape, or form. It leaves you dependent. You don't want to be dependent on anything. Now, you can accept certain things. You can have other people be responsible for certain things. You can trust people for certain things, but you should not just be dependent on people. And I'm gonna tell you why, because it's intrinsic in the nature, and it's very few people that will transcend that nature. And it's, fight or flight. You do what you gotta do to survive, survival instincts. Very few people get past the survival instinct. So when you become dependent on another person, basically you're gonna become manipulated if their survival is ever threatened, because they're gonna do what they need to do to survive, and that involves manipulating you, sir, ma'am. You're in for a ride. So this is important, family. This is very important stuff. This is how pleasure can be a bad thing, when you become addicted to pleasure because you haven't received pleasure in so long, whether it's on any level: physical, sexual, mental, emotional, intellectual. It can be a hindrance to your development and your progress because you want it all the time. And if only one person can give it to you, you're going to be dependent on that person. And I already told you, there's very few people that transcend this survival instinct and this self-sacrificing or this other sacrificing mentality, because people will sacrifice you, y'all. I keep it straight. People will sacrifice you, and it's not because they're a bad person. It's because they want to live. They want to survive. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. So, family, how do you get rid of this? How do you, close yourself off from not being manipulated? And the answer is, you don't close yourself off. You create boundaries. Jordan, that sounds like I'm closing myself off. No, it's just making requirements to get close to you. And if people don't meet those requirements, you keep those boundaries up and they are not allowed to cross it. And I talked about boundaries in another one of my videos. You must learn to have standards for your life. See, the standards will allow you the buffer so that you don't have people coming in to manipulate you. It also allows you to avoid unnecessary arousal from the wrong people. You don't want everybody arousing you just because they can. Look, there's a lot of smooth talkers out there. There's a lot of beautiful women out there. There's a lot of people who know psychology and can get in your mind and can fulfill some of those things that you feel that you're missing. But guess what? It'll be temporary or it'll be conditional. You don't want those things, especially not conditional, and especially not temporary. I'm going to tell you why, and then we're going to end this discussion. If it's temporary, you're going to basically be an addict, because you're going to be looking for the next hit anywhere you can find it. That's why you find people jumping from relationship to relationship and they get in the same patterns, and you wonder why they haven't gotten it. Like, they need to get out of these patterns. It's because these patterns serve a purpose, if only for a moment. People have not healed enough to recognize that they have to fulfill some of these voids. And the reason why they can't fulfill some of these voids is not because they're incompetent. It's not because they're slow. It's none of those things. They just haven't been guided in the right way. They don't have the right information to fulfill and complete that process. So they go to other people external to them, and they depend on those people instead of depending on themselves. The second reason Or the second error or issue is conditional fulfillment. You don't want to keep dealing with conditional fulfillment unless we're dealing with a law. Another conversation for another day. You don't want conditional fulfillment because you will always be forced to change who and what you are and how you operate. In other words, your integrity will be compromised and you'll be forced to do things that are out of your norm, out of your habit, out of your space of being to get this need met from somebody else. Right. So, we'll start from childhood because everybody's had this, if you don't do this, I'm going to be mad at you. If you don't do this or else. See what that does is it introduces fear and or scarcity. Fear and or scarcity. These are very powerful motivating factors. Being fearful, even though fearful is only a thought, is a powerful motivating factor because you scarce it really leads down to scarcity in a nutshell. Scarcity is a motivating factor because that is the ultimate form of loss. And you don't want to lose certain things. It reminds you that you're out of control. It's triggering and it plays with your mind. And so when somebody says you need to do this or else, fear is introduced, scarcity is introduced, and now you will compromise your normal way of thinking and doing and acting in order to not experience the fear, aka the scarcity. Family, that's powerful right there. And people recognize these thoughts and they will play on those for their advancement and not your development. Now, conditional things are sometimes not a bad thing when they're for your development, but a lot of the times people don't understand that on that level. So they do things to play you and to manipulate you into doing things for them and not for your development, not for your advancement. This is how emotional arousal can be detrimental to your development and it can lead you to manipulation. That's the talk for today, family. As always, I offer you my service, and it's not just a service so you can pay me. No, this opportunity, this offer is for you to be able to work on your dreams, to work on your goals, to get to a place where you've never been before. That's all this offer is about. It's the offer to work on yourself. How much longer will you stay in this spot, suffering for no reason, losing your peace of mind just because you don't want to take action? Just because you're afraid, just because you don't know. Look, what got you here won't get you there. And you can't get a new car with an old one parked in the driveway. You got to do things differently. And if you're ready to change, if you're willing to commit to yourself, I'm willing to show up for you. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, I want you to visit IALLG.com. I want you to hit schedule. And we're going to only do 3 things on this call. There's no commitments unless you want to, unless you're ready. Because I don't want to work with anybody who's not committed. Number 1, we'll figure out where you're at in life, what your goals are, what you're building. Number 2, we're going to start figuring out where you want to go in life. And then number 3, we're going to develop a game plan and see if what I have to offer you can actually help you. That's all we're going to do. All right. So I want you to visit IALLG.com, hit schedule at the top, and we can get started. But with that being said, this is Brother Coasty at IALLG.com. We are always building bridges within to explore the world without. Peace.